I sat in the glass-walled conference room at Richardson Technologies, presenting my quarterly marketing analysis, when Brandon Richardson, the CEO's 28-year-old son, interrupted me mid-sentence with loud laughter.
"She's just a seat warmer,"
he announced to the room of executives, his voice dripping with condescension. The room erupted in uncomfortable chuckles as my face burned with humiliation. I quietly noted the time, 10:37 a.m., the date, March 15th, and most importantly, Brandon's complete lack of any official title in the company directory. The elevator ride back to the third floor felt like an eternity. My hands trembled as I clutched my presentation folder, the numbers I had spent weeks compiling now meaningless after Brandon's public dismissal. The 23% drop in customer satisfaction that I had discovered through months of data analysis had been reduced to a joke in front of the entire executive team. I walked past my co-workers' desks, avoiding eye contact as I made my way to my small cubicle near the window. Janet Morse, the VP of Sales, had laughed the loudest when Brandon made his comment. David Park, our CFO, had simply stared at his laptop screen, while HR Director Linda Walsh had nodded along with what she probably thought was harmless workplace banter. But I knew better. This wasn't the first time Brandon had undermined me in meetings. Over the past 6 months, he had made increasingly bold comments about my work, always framed as casual observations that somehow managed to discredit everything I presented. I opened my laptop and created a new document. March 15th, 10:37 a.m. quarterly review meeting, conference room B, I typed. Brandon Richardson stated, "She's just a seat warmer," in response to customer retention presentation. Witnesses Janet Morse, David Park, Linda Walsh, 7 other attendees. As I organized my files from the morning's presentation, something caught my attention. A folder on our shared server that I didn't recognize labeled BRA projects. Curiosity got the better of me and I clicked on it. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the contents. Email threads with my name in the subject line forwarded from Brandon's account to external addresses I didn't recognize. Copies of my marketing campaign proposals with Brandon's name listed as the primary contributor. Draft presentations that looked suspiciously similar to projects I had submitted to Harold Richardson, Brandon's father, and our CEO months earlier. Finding anything interesting, I jumped at the voice behind me. Amy Chen from IT support stood at my cubicle entrance, her expression serious. We had worked together on several database projects, and she had always been friendly but professional. "Amy, I didn't hear you approach," I said, minimizing the window. "That's because you're looking at something you probably shouldn't be," she replied, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "Can." 5 minutes later, we sat in Amy's small IT office on the second floor. She locked the door behind us and pulled up a chair next to her computer. "I've been monitoring some unusual file access patterns," Amy began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Brandon Richardson's login has been accessing and downloading files from your project folders for the past 4 months. She showed me the system logs on her screen. Entry after entry of Brandon's user account pulling down my proprietary marketing algorithms, customer analysis reports, and strategic planning documents. Why didn't you report this?" I asked. Amy laughed bitterly. "To whom, Linda Walsh?" "She's the one who approved Brandon's system access in the first place, even though he doesn't have an official position with the company." I stared at the timestamps on the logs. Every major project I had worked on, every innovative campaign I had developed had been accessed by Brandon within days of my completion. No wonder Harold Richardson had rejected my last 2 major proposals after I submitted them. Brandon had presented nearly identical ideas to his father, taking credit for work that had consumed my evenings and weekends. "There's more," Amy continued, pulling up another screen. "He's been downloading client contact lists, financial reports, and proprietary research data. Last week alone, he pulled 12 gigabytes of confidential information." My mind raced as I processed this information. Amy, I need you to document everything. Can you create a comprehensive report of his unauthorized access? I already have, she replied, handing me a flash drive. I've been keeping records because something felt wrong. This contains 6 months of access logs, file downloads, and system usage patterns. It's all there. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and the employee handbook I had grabbed from the office. Page after page of corporate policies that most people never bothered to read, but tonight they felt like potential weapons. I found what I was looking for on page 37. Clause 7 under Workplace Conduct and Equity. Any employee found to engage in systematic harassment, intimidation, or intellectual property theft shall face immediate disciplinary action up to and including termination regardless of their position within the company or familial relationships to management. The clause had been implemented 3 years ago, shortly after I had started working at Richardson Technologies. According to the handbook's revision history, it had been personally added by Harold Richardson himself. I photographed each page of Amy's documentation, created backup copies of all the evidence, and spent hours building a timeline that connected Brandon's file access to his subsequent presentations and my rejected proposals. By 2 a.m., I had assembled a case that showed a clear pattern of intellectual property theft spanning 6 months. But as I prepared for bed, one question nagged at me if Harold Richardson had implemented Clause 7 specifically to prevent this kind of abuse. Why was his own son getting away with it? The next morning, I arrived at the office an hour before my usual time. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few cars belonging to the overnight security staff and early rising executives. I used my badge to access the building and made my way to the 3rd floor, where the soft hum of computers and ventilation systems created an oddly peaceful atmosphere. I needed to understand the full scope of what Brandon was doing, and I suspected that other employees might have information that could help me build a stronger case. My first stop was Tyler Brooks, a junior marketing assistant who had always seemed nervous around Brandon. Tyler was at his desk by 7:15 earlier than usual for someone who typically arrived just before the 8:30 start time. When I approached, he looked up with tired eyes and an expression that suggested he hadn't slept well. "Tyler, do you have a few minutes to talk?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He glanced around nervously. "Is this about yesterday's meeting? Because I don't really have any opinions about what happened." "Actually, I wanted to ask you about some project work you've been doing. Have you been helping Brandon with any special assignments lately?" Tyler's face went pale. He stood up quickly, motioning for me to follow him to the small break room near the stairwell. Once we were alone, he slumped into one of the plastic chairs. "I can't talk about this," he said. "I need this job, Della. I've got student loans and rent, and my girlfriend is pregnant. We can't afford for me to get fired." "Tyler, what exactly has Brandon asked you to do?" For a moment, he just stared at his hands. Then, as if a dam had burst, the words came pouring out. "He's been making me compile client contact lists from our customer database. Names, email addresses, phone numbers, purchase histories, everything. He said it was for a special project his father had approved, something about customer outreach and retention strategies." "How long has this been going on?" 3 months. Maybe longer. He started small, asking for just a few contact records here and there, but then it escalated. Last week, he wanted the complete contact information for every client we've worked with in the past 2 years. That's over 800 companies. Tyler looked up at me with desperate eyes. When I hesitated, he said he could have me fired by lunch if I didn't cooperate. He told me his father wouldn't think twice about eliminating someone who wasn't a team player. Did he explain what he was doing with this information? Not really, but I've seen him in the small conference room making phone calls during lunch breaks. He always closes the door and draws the blinds. One time I walked by and heard him talking about marketing strategies and competitive analysis. It didn't sound like any internal project I knew about. I felt my pulse quicken. Tyler, I need you to document everything he's asked you to do. Dates, specific requests, exact conversations. Can you do that? I don't know. What if he finds out? What if he doesn't, and this continues? How many other people do you think he's pressuring? Tyler's expression shifted as he considered this possibility.
Actually,
now that you mention it, Sarah Martinez from accounting has seemed really stressed lately, and James Wilson from customer service has been working late every night for the past month. After Tyler agreed to document his interactions with Brandon, I spent the next hour carefully approaching other junior employees. Sarah Martinez confirmed that Brandon had been requesting financial reports and budget allocations for clients claiming he needed them for a comprehensive business analysis. James Wilson admitted that Brandon had pressured him into providing customer service records and complaint histories. By 10 a.m., I had spoken with 4 different employees who had all been coerced into providing Brandon with confidential company information. Each of them had been told that their cooperation was essential to a special project approved by Harold Richardson. Each had been threatened with job loss if they refused or discussed the requests with anyone else. But the most shocking revelation came from Kelly Thompson in graphic design. She approached me during the lunch break, looking around nervously before sitting down at my table in the cafeteria. I heard you've been asking questions about Brandon, she said quietly. There's something you need to know. Kelly pulled out her phone and showed me a business card she had photographed. Strategic Solutions Consulting. It read with Brandon Richardson listed as principal consultant and a phone number I didn't recognize. He asked me to design a logo and business cards for his consulting company, Kelly explained. He said it was a side project his father had approved, something about learning the business from the ground up. But when I researched the company name online, I found out it was registered as an LLC 3 months ago. My mind started connecting the dots. Kelly, what kind of services does this consulting company supposedly provide? Marketing strategy, competitive analysis, customer retention programs. Basically everything we do here at Richardson Technologies, but for outside clients. Do you know who these outside clients are? Kelly nodded grimly. I've seen some of the proposals he asked me to format. Tech Forward Solutions, Innovate Marketing Group Digital Strategy Partners. These are companies that compete directly with us for the same clients. The full picture was becoming clear. Brandon wasn't just stealing my intellectual property for personal credit. He was running an unauthorized consulting business that sold Richardson Technologies' proprietary strategies and client information to our competitors. That afternoon, I called Amy Chen and asked her to run a more detailed analysis of Brandon's system access. What she found confirmed my worst fears. Over the past 3 months, Brandon had downloaded client lists worth millions of dollars in potential revenue proprietary algorithms that had taken our company years to develop, and strategic plans that represented months of collaborative effort from multiple departments. According to my calculations, Amy said the information he's accessed could be worth several $100,000 to competing firms. If they're using our strategies to undercut our proposals or target our clients, the financial damage could be enormous. That evening, I sat in my apartment with boxes of evidence spread across my dining room table. Bank records that Tyler had reluctantly helped me obtain showed that Strategic Solutions Consulting had received payments totaling $47,000 over the past 3 months. Client proposals that Kelly had designed showed Brandon offering services that directly competed with Richardson Technologies' core business model. But what disturbed me most was the systematic way Brandon had exploited the fears and vulnerabilities of junior employees. Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly had all been chosen specifically because they were young, financially insecure, and unlikely to question orders that appeared to come from upper management. I realized that Brandon's behavior in meetings, his casual dismissal of my work, and his general attitude of entitlement were just the visible symptoms of a much deeper problem. He wasn't just an arrogant nepotism hire. He was systematically destroying the company his father had built one stolen project and compromised employee at a time. As I organized the evidence for the comprehensive report I was preparing, one question continued to haunt me. How was Brandon getting away with such blatant misconduct? Either Harold Richardson was completely unaware of what his son was doing, or there were other people in the company helping to cover up these activities. The next morning would bring answers I wasn't prepared for. Wednesday morning arrived with an unseasonable chill that matched my growing sense of dread. I had spent most of Tuesday night refining my documentation, creating a comprehensive timeline that connected Brandon's unauthorized access to his consulting business and the coercion of junior employees. The evidence was overwhelming, and I felt confident that any reasonable manager would immediately investigate these serious violations. I scheduled a meeting with Linda Walsh, our HR director, for 9 a.m. Linda had been with Richardson Technologies for 8 years and had a reputation for being thorough and fair. If anyone could properly handle a situation involving the CEO's son, it would be someone with her experience and position within the company. Linda's office was located on the 4th floor in a quiet corner with windows overlooking the parking lot. When I arrived, she was reviewing a stack of personnel files, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Della, please come in. You mentioned on your meeting request that you wanted to discuss some workplace concerns." I sat across from her desk and pulled out a folder containing copies of my most compelling evidence. "Linda, I need to report some serious policy violations that I've discovered. This involves harassment, intellectual property theft, and unauthorized use of company resources." Her expression became more serious as I laid out the timeline of events. I showed her the documentation of Brandon's unauthorized system access, the evidence of his consulting business, and the statements from the 4 junior employees who had been coerced into providing confidential information. "These are very serious allegations," Linda said, examining the documents carefully. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention through proper channels. The behavior you're describing would clearly violate multiple company policies, including Clause 7 of our conduct guidelines." I felt a wave of relief. Linda was taking this seriously and understood the gravity of the situation. "What I need you to do," she continued, "is provide me with all of your documentation so I can conduct a thorough investigation. This includes any electronic files, witness statements, and supporting evidence you've gathered. Of course, I can have everything organized and delivered to you by this afternoon." "Excellent. I want you to know that we take these matters very seriously at Richardson Technologies. No employee, regardless of their family connections, is above our workplace standards." Linda's tone was reassuring and professional. "I'll need to interview the other employees you mentioned and review the technical evidence with our IT department. How soon can you have everything ready?" "I can bring you complete copies this afternoon, and I'll make sure Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly are available for interviews." "Perfect. In the meantime, I want you to keep this matter confidential while I conduct my investigation. It's important that we handle this properly and don't jeopardize the integrity of the process." I left Linda's office feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. Finally, someone in authority was taking these violations seriously. I spent the rest of the morning organizing every piece of evidence into a comprehensive package complete with timelines, witness statements, and technical documentation from Amy Chen. That afternoon, I delivered 3 thick binders to Linda's office along with digital copies of all the electronic evidence. She thanked me for my thoroughness and promised to begin her investigation immediately. "I'll be reviewing everything this evening," she assured me. "We should be able to move forward with appropriate disciplinary action very quickly if these allegations are substantiated." I went home that night feeling cautiously optimistic. The evidence was clear, the violations were serious, and Linda had responded exactly as I had hoped a professional HR director would handle such a situation. But my optimism was short-lived. Thursday morning, I realized I had forgotten my phone charger at the office. I drove back around 7 p.m. using my badge to access the building after normal business hours. The fourth floor was dimly lit with only the emergency lighting providing minimal illumination in the hallways. As I walked toward the elevators, I noticed light coming from under Linda's office door. Curious about who else was working so late, I approached quietly, intending to say hello if it was someone I knew. Instead, I heard the distinctive sound of a paper shredder coming from inside her office. I pressed my ear against the door and heard Linda's voice, though I couldn't make out specific words. Then I heard another voice responding, a male voice that I recognized immediately. Brandon Richardson was in Linda's office at 7:15 p.m. on a Thursday night. My heart pounded as I tried to process what this could mean. I quietly made my way to the supply closet across the hall, which had a small window that provided a partial view into Linda's office. Hidden behind the filing cabinet in the dark closet, I could see Linda and Brandon clearly through her office window. Linda was feeding documents into a large paper shredder while Brandon sat in the chair across from her desk. On her desk, I could see the distinctive blue binders I had delivered that afternoon. She was destroying my evidence. I pulled out my phone and started recording video through the supply closet window, making sure to capture both Linda and Brandon clearly in the frame. The paper shredder ran continuously for nearly 10 minutes as Linda methodically destroyed page after page of documentation. Then I heard Linda's voice clearly as she picked up her office phone. "We need to contain this before Harold returns from Europe," she said to whoever was on the other end of the call. "The situation has escalated beyond what we initially anticipated." Brandon's voice carried across the room as he responded to something Linda had said. "My father specifically told me to handle any personnel issues that arose while he was traveling. Della is clearly not a team player, and she's been causing problems for months." Linda nodded as she continued feeding documents into the shredder. "I've been documenting her performance issues for some time. Missed deadlines, inappropriate workplace behavior, failure to collaborate effectively with management. We'll have enough justification for disciplinary action if she continues to be disruptive." My hands shook as I continued recording. Not only was Linda destroying evidence of Brandon's misconduct, but they were actively conspiring to retaliate against me for reporting it. "What about the other employees who provided statements?" Brandon asked. "Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly all signed confidentiality agreements when they were hired," Linda replied. "If they discuss internal company matters with outside parties or create disruptions, we can terminate them for breach of contract. They'll fall in line once they understand the consequences." The conversation continued for another 15 minutes. Linda revealed that she had been aware of Brandon's consulting business for months and had actually helped him structure it to avoid direct conflicts of interest. She had received a $30,000 consulting fee for her assistance money that appeared on her tax records as income from freelance HR services. Brandon explained that he had been gradually building strategic solutions consulting as a way to learn the business while generating income independent of his father's company. He claimed that Harold Richardson had given him permission to use company resources for educational purposes, though he admitted that his father wasn't aware of the specific details of his business activities. Most shocking of all, Linda revealed that she had been intercepting and filtering communications intended for Harold Richardson while he was traveling in Europe. Several employees had attempted to contact the CEO directly about various issues, but Linda had been screening his messages and handling what she called routine personnel matters without bothering him. "Harold trusts me to manage domestic operations while he focuses on international expansion," Linda explained. "He doesn't need to be distracted by every minor employee complaint." When they finally finished their conversation and Linda had shredded the last of my evidence, Brandon thanked her for handling the situation professionally. They discussed scheduling individual meetings with Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly to remind them of their confidentiality obligations and the potential consequences of spreading rumors or unsubstantiated allegations. As they prepared to leave, Linda made one final phone call. "Janet, it's Linda. We need to discuss the Della situation tomorrow morning. I think it's time we addressed her performance issues more directly." I realized that Janet Morse, the VP of Sales, who had laughed loudest at Brandon's humiliation of me, was also part of this conspiracy. The three of them were working together to protect Brandon while silencing anyone who threatened to expose his misconduct. I waited in the dark supply closet for 20 minutes after they left, making sure the fourth floor was completely empty before emerging. My mind raced as I processed what I had witnessed. The HR director, the CEO's son, and a senior vice president were actively conspiring to cover up serious policy violations and retaliate against employees who reported misconduct. The system I had trusted to protect employees and enforce company policies was completely corrupted. Linda Walsh, who was supposed to investigate harassment and policy violations, was instead helping to facilitate them. The evidence I had spent days gathering had been destroyed, and the witnesses who had trusted me enough to come forward were now facing potential termination. But as I drove home that night, I realized that Linda and Brandon had made a critical mistake. They assumed that destroying my paper documentation would eliminate the evidence of Brandon's misconduct. They didn't know about the digital backups I had created, the additional documentation that Amy Chen had prepared, or the video recording I had just captured of their conspiracy. Most importantly, they didn't know that Harold Richardson had never actually authorized his son's business activities or given Linda permission to handle serious personnel matters in his absence. I spent that night researching Richardson Technologies' corporate structure and external oversight. If I couldn't trust the internal system to investigate and address these violations, I would have to find another way to ensure that justice was served. The next morning would bring a new strategy, one that would bypass the corrupted internal process entirely. Friday morning began with a phone call that would change everything. At 7:30 a.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was professional and reassuring. Ms. Martinez. This is Patricia Hayes from Hayes Morrison and Associates. We're the external legal counsel for Richardson Technologies. I understand you may have some concerns about workplace issues that I should be aware of. I was confused. I'm sorry, but I haven't contacted any external attorneys. How did you get my name? That's interesting, Patricia replied. According to my records, Linda Walsh from HR was supposed to have forwarded a complaint from you regarding harassment and policy violations. She contacted our office yesterday requesting guidance on proper investigation procedures. My stomach dropped. Linda had lied about forwarding my complaint to external counsel. Instead, she was probably trying to get legal advice on how to cover up the situation more effectively. Ms. Hayes, I think there's been some confusion. Linda never forwarded my complaint anywhere. In fact, I have reason to believe she's been actively suppressing it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ms. Martinez, I think we need to talk in person. Are you available to meet this morning? An hour later, I sat in Patricia Hayes' law office in downtown Austin, a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake. Patricia was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. Before we begin, Patricia said, I want you to understand that Richardson Technologies has retained our firm specifically to ensure compliance with employment law and corporate governance standards. Harold Richardson takes these matters very seriously, which is why he established our relationship 3 years ago. That's around the same time Clause 7 was added to the employee handbook, I observed. Patricia nodded. Exactly. Harold implemented those policies after a previous incident involving family members and potential conflicts of interest. He was very clear that he never wanted to see his company compromised by nepotism or abuse of authority. I spent the next 2 hours walking Patricia through everything I had discovered. I showed her the video recording of Linda and Brandon destroying evidence, the documentation of Brandon's consulting business, and the statements from the coerced junior employees. I also shared Amy Chen's technical analysis of Brandon's unauthorized system access. Ms. Martinez, this is far more serious than a simple harassment complaint, Patricia said after reviewing all the evidence. What you're describing involves multiple felonies, including corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to defraud shareholders. The problem is that Linda Walsh destroyed most of my original documentation, I explained. She's also threatening the other witnesses and planning to retaliate against me. Patricia made several notes on her legal pad. The first thing you need to understand is that Linda Walsh has absolutely no authority to conduct investigations involving criminal activity. The second thing you need to know is that Harold Richardson never authorized anyone to handle serious personnel matters in his absence. She pulled out a thick folder from her filing cabinet. In fact, our firm maintains direct communication with Harold for precisely these situations. He specifically instructed me to contact him immediately if any issues arose involving his family members or potential conflicts of interest. But Linda said Harold is traveling in Europe and doesn't want to be disturbed with routine personnel matters. Harold Richardson is indeed in Europe, but he checks email twice daily and has made himself available for urgent matters. Linda Walsh has no authority to filter his communications or make decisions about personnel investigations without his direct approval. Patricia picked up her phone and started dialing. I'm going to contact Harold immediately. What you've described requires his personal attention and probably law enforcement involvement. While Patricia made her calls, I reflected on how naive I had been to trust the internal reporting system. I had assumed that HR policies and procedures would protect employees who reported misconduct. Instead, the very people responsible for enforcing those policies were the ones violating them. Patricia returned to the table with a grave expression. I've spoken with Harold Richardson. He's flying back from Frankfurt tonight and will arrive tomorrow morning. More importantly, he had no idea that his son was even attending company meetings, let alone accessing confidential systems or running a consulting business. So Brandon was lying about having his father's permission. Completely. Harold thought Brandon was working part-time at a marketing firm downtown while taking business classes. He never authorized him to use Richardson Technologies' resources or participate in company operations. Patricia opened her laptop and began typing. Harold has instructed me to begin immediate legal proceedings to protect the company's interests. We're filing for temporary restraining orders to freeze Brandon's consulting business assets and prevent further access to company systems. What about Linda Walsh and Janet Morse? Harold was particularly disturbed to learn about Linda's involvement. He trusted her completely and had no idea she was intercepting his communications or handling personnel matters without authorization. As for Janet Morse, Harold wants to review any connection she might have to this situation. Patricia spent the next hour explaining the legal process that would unfold over the coming days. Criminal referrals would be made to the district attorney's office for the theft and fraud charges. A forensic accounting firm would be brought in to assess the financial damage to Richardson Technologies. And most importantly, Harold Richardson would be taking personal control of the entire situation. Ms. Martinez, I want you to understand that what you've done takes tremendous courage, Patricia said as our meeting concluded. Corporate fraud cases often go unreported because employees are afraid of retaliation or don't believe they'll be taken seriously. You've potentially saved Richardson Technologies from millions of dollars in losses and protected other employees from further exploitation. That afternoon, Patricia accompanied me back to Richardson Technologies to secure additional evidence before Brandon or Linda could destroy anything else. We met with Amy Chen, who provided Patricia with comprehensive technical documentation of all the unauthorized system access. We also conducted formal interviews with Tyler, Sarah James, and Kelly, giving them legal protection as witnesses in what would become a criminal investigation. The most important thing for all of you to understand, Patricia explained to the group, is that you were victims of coercion and intimidation. Your cooperation with Brandon's illegal activities was obtained through threats and false claims of authority. No one will face any negative consequences for coming forward with information. Tyler looked relieved for the first time in months. So we're not going to get fired for this. Quite the opposite, Patricia replied. Harold Richardson specifically wants to recognize and reward employees who demonstrate integrity and courage in protecting the company's interests. By the end of Friday, Patricia had assembled a comprehensive legal case that went far beyond workplace harassment. The evidence showed systematic fraud, theft of trade secrets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a conspiracy involving multiple employees in positions of trust. But the most satisfying part of the day came when Patricia showed me Harold Richardson's personal response to learning about the situation. I built this company on principles of integrity, fairness, and respect for every employee, regardless of their position. His email read, "To learn that my own son has violated those principles while senior managers enabled and covered up his behavior is deeply disturbing. I will personally ensure that justice is served and that the employees who courageously reported this misconduct are protected and recognized for their integrity." Harold's message continued, "Della Martinez exemplifies the kind of principled leadership that makes Richardson Technologies successful. Her thorough documentation and courage in reporting these serious violations demonstrates exactly the kind of character I want to see throughout our organization." As I drove home Friday evening, I reflected on how the situation had transformed from a simple harassment complaint to a criminal investigation that would ultimately protect other employees and strengthen the company's ethical standards. Patricia had assured me that Harold Richardson's response would send a clear message throughout the organization that misconduct would not be tolerated regardless of who committed it. The next morning would bring Harold Richardson's return and the beginning of justice for everyone who had been harmed by Brandon's abuse of authority. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that seemed to match my newfound sense of purpose. At exactly 8 a.m., Patricia Hayes called with an update that made my heart race with anticipation. "Harold's plane landed 20 minutes ago," she reported. "He's driving straight to the office and wants to review all the physical evidence before taking any action. He asked me to tell you that he's deeply grateful for your courage and thoroughness in documenting everything." I met Patricia at Richardson Technologies at 9 a.m. The parking lot was nearly empty except for Harold's distinctive black sedan and a few security vehicles. Inside, we found Harold Richardson in his corner office surrounded by boxes of evidence that Patricia's team had secured over the past 24 hours. This was my first time meeting the CEO in person. Harold Richardson was a man in his early 60s with silver hair and tired eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much during his overnight flight from Europe. Despite his obvious exhaustion, he projected an aura of quiet authority and genuine concern. "Ms. Martinez," he said, standing to shake my hand, "I owe you an enormous apology. The behavior you've documented represents everything I've worked to prevent since founding this company. I'm ashamed that my own son was at the center of such serious misconduct. Mr. Richardson, I just want to see justice served and make sure other employees are protected." "That's exactly what's going to happen." Harold's voice was firm with resolve. "I've spent the past 3 hours reviewing every piece of evidence you and Patricia have assembled. What I've discovered goes beyond anything I imagined possible." Harold opened a file folder on his desk. "My son accessed and downloaded proprietary information worth over $350,000 in development costs. His consulting business received payments from 4 companies that compete directly with us for major clients. And the systematic coercion of junior employees represents exactly the kind of abuse of power that Clause 7 was designed to prevent.
What disturbs me most,
Harold continued, is the involvement of senior staff members who I trusted completely. Linda Walsh has been intercepting my communications for months, preventing me from learning about serious issues affecting my employees and my company. Patricia handed Harold a legal document.
We've already obtained court orders freezing Brandon's consulting business assets.
The judge agreed that the evidence shows clear fraud and theft of trade secrets. We've also secured restraining orders preventing Brandon from accessing Richardson Technologies' property or contacting any current employees.
What about the other employees who were involved in the cover-up?
I asked. Harold's expression became even more serious.
Linda Walsh and Janet Morse will be terminated immediately when they arrive Monday morning.
Their actions violated multiple fiduciary duties and potentially exposed the company to significant legal liability. I've already contacted the State Bar Association about Linda's conduct, and Janet's actions will be reported to the relevant professional organizations.
Mr. Richardson,
Patricia interjected,
we should also discuss the positive changes you'll want to implement to prevent this situation from recurring.
Harold nodded thoughtfully.
I've been giving that considerable thought during my flight home. Della, I'd like to offer you the position of marketing director effective immediately. Your salary will increase by 40%, and you'll receive stock options vesting over 3 years.
I was stunned. Sir, that's incredibly generous, but I just want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other employees.
That's exactly why you're the right person for this position, Harold replied. You demonstrated integrity, courage, and excellent judgment under extremely difficult circumstances. More importantly, you protected other employees who were being exploited by people in positions of power.
Harold stood and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot.
I'm also establishing a new employee advocacy program with direct reporting lines to external counsel.
No employee should ever have to worry that reporting misconduct will result in retaliation or cover-ups.
What about Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly? I asked.
Each of them will receive promotions and salary increases in recognition of their courage in coming forward. They'll also participate in a new employee development program that I'm creating to ensure that junior staff members have mentorship and protection from exploitation.
Patricia gathered her documents and prepared to leave. Harold, the district attorney's office, will want to interview you early next week. Based on the evidence we've provided, they're preparing to file formal criminal charges against Brandon and potentially Linda Walsh. I'll cooperate fully with law enforcement, Harold assured her. No one is above the law, including my family members.
After Patricia left, Harold asked me to walk through the office with him.
I want to understand exactly how this situation was able to develop without my knowledge.
Help me see what I missed and how we can prevent it in the future.
We spent 2 hours touring every department with Harold asking detailed questions about communication patterns, reporting procedures, and employee concerns. He spoke personally with several staff members who were working Saturday overtime, apologizing for the failures in leadership that had allowed the misconduct to continue. Della, I want you to know that your actions have probably saved this company from catastrophic damage, Harold said as we returned to his office. If Brandon had continued selling our proprietary strategies to competitors, we could have lost millions in revenue and dozens of client relationships. I just hope that other employees will feel comfortable reporting problems in the future. That's going to be one of your primary responsibilities as marketing director. I want you to work with external counsel to develop new policies and procedures that ensure employee concerns are heard and addressed promptly. By Saturday afternoon, Harold had contacted every member of the senior management team to inform them of the situation and the upcoming personnel changes. He scheduled an all-company meeting for Monday morning to address the situation transparently and announce the new policies being implemented.
"I believe in accountability and transparency," Harold explained. "Our employees deserve to know that we take misconduct seriously and that we're implementing concrete changes to protect everyone's interests."
That evening, Harold called me personally to provide an update on the law enforcement investigation.
"The district attorney's office is treating this as a high-priority white-collar crime case," he reported.
"They're particularly interested in the systematic nature of the fraud and the involvement of multiple defendants. Patricia estimates that Brandon could face up to 7 years in federal prison if convicted on all charges."
"How are you handling this personally, Mr. Richardson? This must be incredibly difficult for your family."
There was a long pause before Harold answered.
"Della, I've spent 30 years building this company based on principles of integrity and respect for every employee. To learn that my own son violated those principles while exploiting hardworking people is heartbreaking. But I won't compromise the values that make Richardson Technologies successful, not even for family."
Monday morning would bring the reckoning that Brandon, Linda, and Janet had never imagined possible. Justice was finally within reach, and the employees who had suffered under their abuse of power would see that courage and integrity ultimately triumph over corruption and privilege. Monday morning arrived with the kind of electric tension that preceded thunderstorms. I arrived at Richardson Technologies at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than usual, and immediately noticed 2 unfamiliar black sedans in the parking lot. Through the lobby windows, I could see men in dark suits speaking with our security guards. Harold Richardson had promised justice, and it appeared that justice was about to be served. I made my way to the 3rd floor where several of my co-workers were already gathered around Tyler's desk, speaking in hushed tones about the unusual activity in the lobby. Amy Chen approached me with barely contained excitement.
"Della, have you seen what's happening downstairs? There are federal agents in the lobby and security is setting up some kind of checkpoint near the elevators."
Before I could respond, Harold Richardson's voice came over the building's public address system.
"All employees, please remain at your workstations. We will be conducting a mandatory company meeting at 9 a.m. in the main conference room. Thank you for your patience and cooperation."
At exactly 8 a.m., Brandon Richardson walked through the front entrance with his usual confident swagger, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break over him. He was dressed in an expensive suit and carried his leather briefcase, apparently expecting another day of unauthorized meeting attendance and systematic misconduct. The lobby security guard directed Brandon toward the elevator where 2 federal agents were waiting with paperwork in their hands. I watched from the 3rd floor window as Brandon's expression changed from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. The conversation lasted approximately 5 minutes. Brandon gestured emphatically at one point, apparently trying to explain something to the agents. Then one of them handed him an official document while the other spoke into a radio device. By 8:15, Brandon was being escorted out of the building in handcuffs. The sight of Harold Richardson's son being arrested in the lobby of Richardson Technologies sent shockwaves throughout the building. Employees gathered at windows and in hallways trying to process what they were witnessing. At 8:30, Linda Walsh arrived for what she believed would be another normal day of managing human resources and covering up misconduct. She parked her car in her usual spot near the main entrance and walked toward the building with her typical brisk efficiency. She never made it past the security desk. 2 different federal agents approached Linda as she entered the lobby. The conversation was brief and professional. Linda's face went pale as she read the documents they handed her. Within minutes, she was being escorted back to her car with instructions not to return to company property. From my position on the 3rd floor, I could see Harold Richardson standing in his office window watching the scene unfold in the parking lot below. His expression was grave but determined, the look of a man doing what needed to be done regardless of the personal cost. Janet Morse arrived at 8:45 just as Linda Walsh was being driven away by federal agents. Janet apparently recognized what was happening because she immediately turned around and walked back to her car without entering the building. She wouldn't escape so easily. Harold Richardson had coordinated with law enforcement to ensure that all three conspirators would be arrested simultaneously, preventing them from communicating with each other or destroying additional evidence. At 9 a.m. sharp, every employee of Richardson Technologies gathered in the main conference room. Harold stood at the front, flanked by Patricia Hayes and what appeared to be additional legal counsel. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. "I want to address the events you've witnessed this morning," Harold began, his voice carrying clearly throughout the room. "Over the past week, I learned about serious misconduct involving three individuals: my son Brandon Richardson, HR Director Linda Walsh, and VP of Sales Janet Morse." The room remained completely silent as Harold continued. "These individuals engaged in systematic fraud, theft of proprietary information, and harassment of employees who attempted to report their misconduct. The evidence of their crimes was thoroughly documented by one of our employees, Della Martinez, whose courage and integrity exemplify the values that Richardson Technologies was founded upon." All eyes in the room turned toward me. I felt my face flush with a combination of embarrassment and pride. Brandon Richardson was never an employee of this company and had no authorization to access our systems, attend our meetings, or use our resources for his personal business ventures. Despite this, he systematically stole proprietary information worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and sold it to competing firms. Harold's voice became stronger as he continued. "Linda Walsh and Janet Morse actively participated in covering up these crimes while threatening employees who attempted to report the misconduct. Their actions violated every principle of trust and fiduciary responsibility that positions of leadership require. All three individuals have been arrested this morning on federal charges, including fraud, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy. They will no longer have any association with Richardson Technologies." The room buzzed with quiet conversations as employees processed this information. "More importantly," Harold said, raising his voice slightly to regain attention, "I want to recognize the four employees who demonstrated extraordinary courage in coming forward with information about these crimes: Tyler Brooks, Sarah Martinez, James Wilson, and Kelly Thompson all risked potential retaliation to protect our company and their fellow employees." Harold announced promotions and salary increases for each of the four junior employees who had been coerced into helping Brandon. Their new positions would give them additional authority and job security, ensuring they would never again be vulnerable to exploitation by people in positions of power. I also want to announce that Della Martinez has been promoted to Marketing Director effective immediately. Her thorough investigation and principled response to misconduct demonstrate exactly the kind of leadership this company needs. After the meeting, Harold asked me to join him in his office along with Patricia Hayes and the external legal counsel. "The financial audit results came in this morning," Patricia reported. "Brandon's theft and the resulting competitive disadvantage cost Richardson Technologies approximately $350,000 in lost revenue over the past 6 months. If his activities had continued, the damage could have reached several million dollars annually." "What's the status of the criminal proceedings?" Harold asked. "Brandon is facing federal charges that could result in up to 7 years in prison. Linda Walsh is charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Janet Morse is being investigated for receiving improper benefits and participating in the cover-up." Harold turned to me with the expression of sincere gratitude. "Della, I cannot adequately express how grateful I am for your actions. You saved this company from potentially catastrophic damage while protecting employees who were being exploited by people they should have been able to trust. Mr. Richardson, I just hope this sends a message that employee concerns will be taken seriously in the future."
That message will be reinforced by concrete policy changes, Harold assured me. We're implementing new reporting procedures with direct access to external counsel regular employee surveys to identify potential problems and enhanced oversight of all family members or associated individuals who might seek to exploit their connections to the company. 2 hours later, I stood at my new office window on the 4th floor, looking down at the parking lot where Brandon Richardson had been arrested that morning. The space that had belonged to Linda Walsh was being cleaned out by security personnel, and Janet Morse's parking spot remained empty. Justice had been swift and comprehensive. The 3 individuals who had conspired to exploit their positions of power and abuse, vulnerable employees, were facing serious criminal charges. The company's proprietary information was protected. Its financial interests were secured, and its employees had been shown that courage and integrity would always be rewarded over corruption and privilege. As I unpacked boxes in my new office that afternoon, Tyler Brooks knocked on my door. Della, I wanted to thank you for everything you did. I know it took incredible courage to stand up to Brandon and Linda, especially when you didn't know if anyone would believe you or support you. Tyler, you and the others were just as brave for coming forward with information. Without your testimony, we never could have built such a strong case. I've been thinking about what Harold said this morning about the values that Richardson Technologies was founded on. I think I understand now why those values matter so much. When people in power abuse that power, everyone suffers. But when people like you stand up for what's right, it protects everyone. That evening, Harold Richardson called me personally with an update on the ongoing investigation. The district attorney's office is confident they have enough evidence to secure convictions against all 3 defendants, he reported. More importantly, word has spread throughout our industry about Richardson Technologies' commitment to ethical business practices. We've already received inquiries from several potential clients who want to work with a company that demonstrates such strong values. Monday had been a day of reckoning that would resonate throughout Richardson Technologies for years to come. But it was also the beginning of a new chapter, one built on transparency, accountability, and the recognition that every employee deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. 6 months later, I stood before a conference room filled with new employee orientation participants, sharing the story that had transformed not just my career, but the entire culture of Richardson Technologies. The faces looking back at me were eager and attentive, representing the kind of diverse, talented workforce that Harold Richardson had always envisioned for his company. The most important thing I want you to understand, I told the group, is that every employee at Richardson Technologies has both the right and the responsibility to speak up when they witness misconduct or ethical violations. Your voice matters, and your concerns will be taken seriously. Since the events of that March morning, Richardson Technologies had undergone a complete cultural transformation. The company's revenue had increased by 40%, driven by restored client relationships and a reputation for ethical business practices that attracted new customers who valued integrity over convenience. Harold Richardson had kept every promise he made during those tense days following the arrests. The employee advocacy program I had helped design was now recognized as an industry model for protecting workers from harassment and exploitation. Direct reporting lines to external counsel ensured that no employee would ever again face the kind of systematic cover-up that Linda Walsh had orchestrated. Tyler Brooks, now promoted to marketing coordinator, had become one of my most valuable team members. His experience with Brandon's coercion had given him unique insights into how vulnerable employees could be protected and empowered. Sarah Martinez had advanced to senior accounting analyst and was pursuing her MBA with full company support. James Wilson led our Customer Service Excellence Initiative, and Kelly Thompson headed our new graphic design department. The legal proceedings had concluded exactly as Patricia Hayes had predicted.
Brandon Richardson was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $412,000 in restitution to Richardson Technologies and affected clients. Linda Walsh received 3 years probation and permanent disbarment from practicing human resources in Texas. Janet Morse was fined $75,000 and banned from holding executive positions in publicly traded companies. But the most satisfying outcome wasn't the punishment of those who had abused their power. It was the transformation of Richardson Technologies into a workplace where every employee felt valued, protected, and empowered to contribute their best efforts. Harold Richardson had established the Della Martinez Workplace Ethics Award, an annual recognition for employees who demonstrated courage in upholding company values. The first recipient was Amy Chen, whose technical expertise and quiet integrity had been essential to building the case against Brandon's illegal activities. Amy exemplifies the principle that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it, Harold had said during the awards ceremony. Her willingness to document and report suspicious activity protected our company's most valuable assets while demonstrating the kind of character that makes Richardson Technologies successful. I had also become a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, sharing our experience with corporate accountability and employee protection. The story of how systematic documentation, strategic alliance building, and unwavering commitment to truth had overcome institutional corruption resonated with professionals across many different fields. The key lesson, I would tell conference audiences, is that individual courage combined with thorough preparation and the right support systems can overcome even the most entrenched abuse of power. But it requires organizations to create cultures where integrity is valued more than convenience, and where every employee's voice is heard and respected. Last month, Richardson Technologies was recognized by the Austin Business Journal as Company of the Year for workplace excellence and ethical leadership. The award citation specifically mentioned our employee advocacy program and our commitment to transparency and accountability at all levels of the organization. Harold Richardson had also made good on his promise to prevent family members from exploiting their connections to the company. A new corporate governance structure ensured that any relatives of senior management would be subject to additional oversight and could never again access company resources without explicit authorization and clear boundaries. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the transformation in employee morale and engagement. The annual employee satisfaction survey showed that 97% of staff felt comfortable reporting concerns to management, and 94% believed that Richardson Technologies truly valued their contributions and protected their interests. Tyler approached me after the orientation session carrying a thick folder of new marketing proposals. Della, I wanted you to see the campaign strategies our new junior associates have developed. Their creativity and innovation are incredible, and they all say they feel free to take risks and share bold ideas because they know their contributions will be respected and evaluated fairly. I reviewed the proposals impressed by their originality and strategic thinking. These employees were producing exactly the kind of innovative work that Richardson Technologies needed to stay competitive, and they were doing it in an environment where their intellectual property was protected and their efforts were properly recognized. Tyler. This is exactly what Harold envisioned when he founded this company. Talented people doing their best work in an environment built on trust, respect, and shared commitment to excellence. That evening, as I prepared to leave my office, Harold Richardson stopped by to share some news that brought our story full circle. Della, I wanted to let you know that we just signed our largest client contract in company history. Tech Forward Solutions approached us specifically because of our reputation for ethical business practices and employee-centered culture. They said they wanted to work with a company that demonstrates authentic commitment to doing business the right way. The irony was perfect. Tech Forward Solutions was one of the companies that had paid Brandon's consulting business for stolen Richardson Technologies information. Now they were paying us legitimately for services that would be delivered with full transparency and integrity. They specifically requested that you lead their marketing strategy development, Harold continued. They said your reputation in the industry for principled leadership and innovative thinking makes you exactly the kind of person they want to work with. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from a humiliated employee sitting in a conference room to a respected industry leader helping to shape ethical business practices. The path hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I questioned whether standing up to powerful people was worth the risk, but the answer was clear in everything I saw around me. Tyler, Sarah, James, and Kelly had grown into confident professionals who would never again be vulnerable to exploitation. Richardson Technologies had become a company that other organizations studied and emulated, and hundreds of employees came to work each day knowing that their voices mattered and their contributions were valued. The life lesson that emerged from this experience was profound in its simplicity when faced with systematic abuse of power. The solution isn't to accept injustice or hope that someone else will fix the problem. The solution is to methodically document the truth. Build strategic alliances with people who share your values and maintain unwavering commitment to what's right regardless of the personal cost. True strength doesn't come from having power over others. It comes from using whatever influence you have to protect people who are vulnerable and to create systems that reward integrity over convenience. It comes from understanding that individual courage, when combined with careful preparation and persistent effort, can transform entire organizations and protect countless people from harm. Most importantly, I learned that standing up for what's right creates a legacy that extends far beyond any individual situation. Every employee who feels safe reporting misconduct, every junior associate who can focus on innovative work instead of protecting themselves from exploitation, and every client who chooses to work with ethical companies represents a victory for the principle that integrity should guide every business decision. The woman who had been publicly humiliated and dismissed as just a seat warmer had become a leader whose voice carried weight throughout her industry. But more than that, she had helped create a workplace where no employee would ever again face the choice between their job security and their commitment to doing what's right. Now, I have a question for all of you who've listened to this story. Have you ever witnessed workplace misconduct or abuse of power that made you question whether speaking up was worth the risk? What would give you the courage to document the truth and seek justice even when the people responsible seemed too powerful to challenge? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue this important conversation about creating workplaces where integrity thrives and every voice matters. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help spread the message that individual courage can create lasting change. Subscribe to stay updated on more stories about people who chose to stand up for what's right, even when it wasn't easy. And please share this story with anyone who might need encouragement to speak up against injustice in their own workplace or community. Thank you for listening, and remember that your voice has power. Use it to protect others, to uphold truth, and to create the kind of world where integrity and respect guide every interaction. The courage you show today can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you.